Whether you're a transient student just here for the summer, or whether you're a regular full-time student or part-time student here at the college, or even at a dual enrollment student, that means you're here as a high school student, all students at Lawson State fall under the Code of Conduct. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to get to the Code of Conduct. There are two main portals that you can go through. The first is the student portal, which is located right at the top left side of the website. You can click the student portal. And if you scroll down, just look for the Student Code of Conduct, and we found it very quickly. You can't miss it. Just click this button and it'll take you to it. Another way is to go to Current Students, which you see right here. Click on Current Students and you'll see the same icon. So we just have two ways of getting to the Code of Conduct, and all you have to do is click on this icon. I have it already pulled up, and it'll pull up the Code of Conduct. You can change the size of the Code of Conduct, how it's displaying. For example, if I put 200%, it's going to get very, very large. So you can change this so it can become a little easier for you to view it. And basically what you need to understand about the Code of Conduct is that these are the ground rules of behavior on campus, and they cover a wide variety of things. The Code of Conduct is about 28 pages long. We don't expect you to read this word for word, but we do expect you to familiarize yourself with it. And really, it's always good to print a copy of this or just make sure you know how to get to it quickly. Let's take a look at some of the areas that's covered in the Code of Conduct. First in the book is a list of Code of Conduct violations and recommended sanctions. Sanctions are what the college will use to discipline a student. Let's say that you vandalize property, which is really, really bad to do. There will be some major sanctions levied against that student. But it also allows us to avoid someone over-disciplining a student. For example, we call sanctions, we have graduated sanctions, which means that the first time a student is caught cheating is treated differently than a student who's cheated 3 times, right? So we have different sanctions based on the behavior of that student. The next in this booklet is a detailed breakdown of the Code of Conduct and an overview of due process and the appeal process. Essentially, due process means that you have the right to be heard. That means that you may disagree with what the college is essentially accusing you of doing, and you have a right to be heard, and there are things such as due process hearings, and I'll go over that briefly with you today. So let's take a look at the Code of Conduct. Again, we do not have enough time to go over 28 pages of this, but in general, I'm going to just kind of go over what's in the Code of Conduct and go over a few things with you. This section of again is outlining some types of things that are considered Code of Conduct violations. For example, providing false or misleading information, or forging or misusing college documents or records or identification cards. That is a violation of the Code of Conduct. Misusing computers, sharing your access or passwords that you have for email, Blackboard, and Student Suite. You may not realize that you're not supposed to share that information with anyone. That is a violation of the Code of Conduct. So that's why it's important to look at this document. We also regulate how students behave at sponsored events. Maybe there's a game that you're going to. We're going down to Shelton for a game. You still are a Lawson student, and so that means you still fall under the Code of Conduct. Things like gambling is covered. Violation of any kind of college policy during that time, soliciting or selling on campus. You may not have realized that you need the president's approval before you can just pass out paraphernalia on campus to solicit or sell on campus. So these are things that violate the Code of Conduct. Now, a lot of times students will break the Code of Conduct and come back to us and say, well, I didn't know. Well, see, what you have to realize is that once we publish this on the website, you're responsible for knowing, and we have basically alerted you. Personal property, if you deface or damage or maliciously destroy the property on our campus, that is a major violation, as you can see. And notice what it says: financial restitution, which means we could basically say, hey, you have to pay for this. Stealing, stolen property. Also, eating and drinking in unauthorized areas. So you can kind of see, I'm not going to go over these, but you can see there are rules regarding college instruction. Yes, you do have to listen to your instructor, those kinds of things, right? Even in terms of what you actually wear or bring on campus. You can't promote gang violence and things like that, right? Cheating on tests or individual projects, things like that. Leaving scheduled classes without permission of your instructor. So these are things, failing to follow department rules or directives of instructors, or failing to carry out even assignments. So that's always a surprise to students. That's a violation of the Code of Conduct. Of course, you cannot have drugs and alcohol on campus or campus events. I do want to talk to you about harassment, because we have a no tolerance policy. We view harassment of any students, and that could be sexual harassment or bullying, assaulting, physically pushing, intimidation, whether it's online, social harassment through social media. That is a major violation of the Code of Conduct. So you need to quickly refrain from those kinds of behaviors and report any type of harassment of you on campus or through campus events. So we don't play around with harassment. We take that very, very serious. So that's why you see it's a big chunk of this Code of Conduct, whether we're talking about harassment or sexually harassment, unwelcome sexual advances. Don't do it. Right? Do not do it. If you are engaging and asking people out on a date over and over again, that's harassment. Don't do it, and we're not going to support you in that, and you're going to find yourself sitting in front of a hearing to actually possibly dismiss you from campus. So just don't do it. You want to engage in very normal conversations with individuals on campus. Do not harass. Also, do not retaliate. Retaliation is when someone reports you for harassing them or bullying them, and then you retaliate. Maybe you go out and you do something to their car, or you go around and you're passing the word, you're gossiping. That's a form of retaliation. So just don't do it. We expect all students at Lawson to behave as young adults or older adults. We expect you to behave in a professional way on campus. We also break down social media guidelines. You definitely need to read this section of the Code of Conduct. You need to be aware that you can't just use our name. You cannot defame other students or your teachers through social media. So you need to be aware that social media is not private, right? And it has a history of its own. So just be aware of that. Now, we do give sanctions for violations. This is what I was talking about before. So we actually help faculty and staff. We guide them on different offenses. We have 3 levels of offenses for students. Let's just take cheating, for example. Cheating on tests, individual projects, and individual assignments. Your first offense, you'll get a 0 on the assignment. The second offense, we can fail you from that class. So that's pretty serious. You go from a 0 on one assignment to the second time you cheat, we could actually give you an F or administratively withdraw you from that class. Do not cheat. The third offense, notice this, suspension. That means you're going to go to hearing and we're going to seek to suspend that student, right? So that's the third offense. Understand that this is not just referring to in the same class. It could be, we track offenses of cheating. So if you did the first offense in one class, a second offense in another class, the third offense, we've tracked you, and so we're going to seek to suspend you. We do not in any way tolerate cheating or plagiarism. If you're using students who are using outside sources, we've had students, unfortunately, who have paid for other students to do their work. Things like that are serious, and we have 0 tolerance for it. So we have this broken down: using electronic devices to cheat, passing along work from one class to the next. You can't do any of that. So just go through and check, and you can see cheating is a big section of the sanctions. So again, it'll tell you what is the offense and what's the sanction over here. Purchasing of sharing of work, crib notes. We kind of thought and tried to think of everything we could. Here's the sanctions for college document policy, furnishing false or misleading information, or forgery, things like that. We talked about that earlier, right? Forged checks, things like that. Down here, selling on campus, entering buildings that you're not authorized to enter, damaging, I guess this is more damaging or destroying a property on campus, stealing, eating and drinking. We talked about this stolen property. So I'm just kind of running through these. You can see it's a pretty long laundry list of different things here. Failing to obey directives of faculty, administrators, or security officers, which really are police officers. Our police department, they are actually police officers. They're not security individuals. They are police officers. So you have to be aware of that. You must follow the directives of staff here at the college, unless someone, of course, is asking you to do something that is against policy, okay? And then you need to report that. All right, so we're going to get past this and get quickly into due process. So again, this is talking about harassment, and then we have residence hall. Your residence hall probably has, well, it does. It has its own policy and manual, and your residence hall director will go over that with you. Just remember, if you are in the residence hall, you need to follow all of those rules. Okay. If you refuse to follow a sanction, a lot of times what we do, we have something called judicial educator, which, let's say you were caught cheating. We may have, the sanction is for you to get a 0 on the assignment, but you have to complete judicial educator. That's like a course. We have different courses. They're online for you to take on various sections that you violated. For example, it might be a course that's teaching you about ethics, not cheating, right? Or maybe you were engaged in alcohol use, and so you have to do judicial educator to talk about the dangers of alcohol or drug use. So you have to carry that out. And if you don't carry out the sanctions, there are other sanctions because of that. Okay, so you can read all of this. You can read it all in the book. Let's stop here and talk about due process. Essentially, we do allow students to have hearings so we can hear your response to any allegations. If you notice, in the event a student wishes to waive the right, you can waive a right to a formal hearing. That means you say, you know what, you're not pleading guilty or not guilty. You're just simply saying, okay, I'm going to waive. You guys can issue a sanction against me, and I waive a hearing, because when you go to a hearing, you can have other disciplinary actions imposed. So some students will choose not to go to a hearing. They just say, give me my medicine, and then I'm going to move on. Option 2 is a formal hearing. That means you're saying, no, I don't want to waive my rights. I want to go to a formal hearing. The disciplinary committee is composed of faculty, staff, and 2 students, and they are convened to hear the hearing. Okay? You can also, after they rule, the disciplinary committee will rule. They'll say, either they're going to impose a penalty or they're going to lift the penalty. After that, if you disagree, you can appeal. And this is the booklet where you need to come to go over the steps of how to appeal. And right here, pages 22 and above, it talks about how can you appeal a hearing, and also how do you put in a hearing. So these are the directions of how do you submit an appeal, and where do you submit that appeal online. Everything is done online. And so this is going over pages 23 of the Code of Conduct, is walking you through the appeal process. Okay, so you can appeal academic dishonesty sanctions. You can appeal Code of Conduct sanctions, meaning that if someone accuses you of cheating, you can appeal it. You can say, I disagree, I wasn't cheating, and you have a right to be heard. Okay, you weren't fighting, and you're going to try to fight that, right? And a hearing will decide that. So this booklet is walking you through submitting an appeal, how to appeal those kinds of decisions once they're reached. Okay, and then this section is just dealing with academic dishonesty appeals. So the second half of this Code of Conduct deals with due process and appeals. I would encourage you definitely to read this. Most students don't really, dive into this unless they fall into a situation in which they have violated the Code of Conduct, or they are being accused of violating the Code of Conduct. Okay, so I hope this is kind of just giving you a general overview of the Code of Conduct. Again, remember, as a student of Lawson State, it is incumbent upon you to be familiar with the Code of Conduct. Remember what I said earlier. You can't claim you didn't know. That's just not going to work, right? So you want to make sure you're aware of what's covered in this Code of Conduct and how to locate it. I hope this has been helpful. And again, welcome to Lawson State.